Okay, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a fun little follow-up for you guys from the brands H.G.P and Wolbrook. Now, these are sister brands, and we're looking at the Diver 300 Automatic Commando, as well as the Skindiver 38 Automatic Jumbo Arctic. And I recently reviewed each of these, and I thought, why not make another quick video showing some alternate strap options, as well as showing them side by side. Of course, I do think that some may consider cross-shopping these, although they are quite different, one being traditional Skindiver and one being more of kind of that mil-spec diver. But I think they're both awesome and very much within a similar style in terms of their aesthetics overall. Of course, similarly spec'd in terms of having the same movements and then all of the modern niceties like Sapphires, etc. Yeah. I just thought, hey, why not do a quick little side-by-side? If you're thinking for full review status, definitely check my channel history for that. This is definitely going to be just a quick little down and dirty side-by-side, just covering some of the broad specs, comparing and contrasting. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now both of these watches were previously featured on the channel before, but on different straps. So that was for the full reviews. Here we're seeing them on some alternate strap options, as well as getting a nice side-by-side for both of these vintage-inspired divers. Now, of course, they are sister brands, so not necessarily competing, but I think they could definitely compete for your attention because both of these are really well designed and really well executed. In terms of the pricing difference, you're going to have $636 for the Commando versus $549 for the Skindiver, and I think both of them are quite value rich. Some of the main differences are going to be 300 meter water resistance versus 200 meter water resistance. Other than that, of course, they're going to have a lot of similar specs, apart from the fact that, aesthetically they are different designs, definitely reminiscent of different eras, this being more mid-century in terms of its roots, but also a bit modernized, whereas this one is going to be definitely more in kind of the vein of the 70s and 80s vibes, but still quite handsome. I think both of them, in terms of the size differences, 41.5 millimeters in diameter versus 37 millimeters in diameter, lug to lug of 48 millimeters versus lug to lug of 46, thickness of 12.1 versus thickness of 12. So that's where they are a little bit similar, but you're gonna have a flat sapphire versus a box dome sapphire, so that's kind of why. So both of these are gonna sit very nicely on wrist. Both share 20 millimeter lug widths, which is gonna be very, very useful, and you can both get them on options with these really nice rubber tropic style straps. Of course, aesthetically, one is going to have kind of these speed holes there, which look quite good in terms of the ventilation, and then here the more traditional kind of basket weave adjacent patterning there. So very cool. And again, if you want the full reviews, do check the channel history. I'll try to leave those links here at the end of the video, as well as below in the description if you want to get into more thoughts. But let's go ahead and compare the bezel actions. Ooh, nice 120 clicks. But this one, bidirectional. Also countdown bezel, as you guys can see in terms of the numerals. Very nice. Here, more traditional. Still 120 clicks, but unidirectional, as well as a more standard 60-minute timing bezel there. I do like the acoustics on this one a bit better, although I'd say the tactile engagement in terms of the satisfaction of the clicks might be a little bit looser versus the very, very solid. To the hand, this feels better. To the ear, this sounds a bit better. And that's just me, but let me know what you guys think. Ooh, that is just soothing. Yes, I like that very, very much. All right, with that said, let's actually get these pieces on the wrists and see how they wear. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist or 19 centimeters circumference, nicely suited with the smaller sizing here. I do like that quite a bit. Nice and thin profile, as you guys can see. Also, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, it's going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it actually is due to perspective distortion. So I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame like so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as how this may lay on your own wrist. Very crisp, very clean there, and I think the right amount of pop. On the other hand, though, check this out. Definitely more business oriented here with that military mil spec aesthetic. Very, very nice. A bit thicker there, although not by much technically. At just 0.1 millimeters thicker, but with that thicker bezel profile there, it just has more of a commanding presence. And of course, it is slightly larger, although I think it sits on the wrist beautifully, as you guys can see in terms of the organic shape and the short overhangs. This definitely still really, although out of the two watches is slightly larger, I think very clearly a well sitting and well wearing timepiece. So with that said, we'll get this off the wrist, set up for some lume shots, light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, check that out. Look at that lume. Very nice and bright. Of course, you have a green hue versus a blue hue, but still really, really fantastically executed on either side. Very, very legible. Of course, one thing I always do like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see with these colors, textures, and finishes render-like in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see here, legibility is not an issue with either of these timepieces. One's going to be a little bit cleaner, a little bit more focused, while the other might seem a bit busy, but also, more complex as well. Exuding just a touch more effort and giving you just a bit more information at a glance. So again, it's tough for me to choose a favorite between the two, but let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Which direction are you leaning out of these two fantastic retro dive watches from a brand that's out there really, really doing the work in terms of the assembly, the regulating of the movements, and just the overall design, curating a design aesthetic that just, it's very, very nice. Both of these watches, and they're elevated, right? There are more affordable variants from these brands, not necessarily in these aesthetics, but they do have some down spec options that I think do really well, and these are kind of both some of their latest up spec options, and I like these guys. I do. So that's it. We'll get these on. We'll get into some closing thoughts. And they're going to be simply this. If you want the full review on either of these guys, check out the channel history and just let me know. My question to you is, what do you think? Which direction do you lean and why out of these two? For me, again, it's hard for me to pick a favorite out of the two. I think they both play I think they could really be a nice 1-2 punch, to be quite honest. And I know a lot of guys that are just pure dive watch collectors. So for those of you that are those guys, have 30 dive watches, these are really two great options to put in there. I don't know if they would be the one dive watch in any one collection because they are very specific, not the most versatile watches. But I think that's what makes them special, and that's what makes them collectible in my eye. But again, let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.